I'll just say this. I want to stress that I think AOC and to a certain degree Trump, but Trump certainly has a better understanding of how economics and trade functions. But this element of press mogul politicians is a problem for us.
Right.
I think AOC is a bigger problem because she has no experience and no understanding, and hasn't there's a lot of things Trump has done. Whether you like it or don't like it, he's done a lot of things.
He's done stuff.
The economy was really, really great.
Yep.
AOC has done nothing. She's renamed I think a couple post offices. And other than that, it's been nothing. It's been puff pieces and fluff and gestures that's made her famous. Now, 9-point-something million followers on Twitter. Right. For what? And they re-elect her.
Right. And I think even worse, you will get generations more of AOCs, right? Nobody, yep. I don't think anyone in their right mind would want to be Trump right now. So whatever else you think of the guy, I don't think his situation and his position is enviable. And certainly he's probably not living the sort of carefree and easy life he probably led 10 or 15 years ago. But what you're going to end up, I think what you're going to see, and unfortunately I think you're going to start seeing it on the right too, and no different than on the left, is you're going to see a whole bunch of people who are probably in their teens and 20s now who want to be AOC the next cycle, or the cycle after that, or cycles down the road. And so you're going to end up with a whole bunch of a new crop of politicians who want nothing other than the star power. And right now, the way the incentives are aligned, they're going to get the followers, they're going to get the money, they're going to write books, they're going to sell out, they're going to be on all the podcasts and the TV shows and everything else. And so all of their incentives will be met. And the only person who's getting the short end on that deal is the American people who elected all of these people to lead them.
Now, all of that operates under the assumption that from where we are now, there's no dramatic and immediate escalations.
That's a good
particularly point. Following November 3rd. So assuming that what we see, we get increments of, I agree with you. We'll end up with a bunch more social media influencer types who don't really do anything other than yo, look at my selfie. I'm on Instagram. Vote for me. And then people do because
they are on Twitch.
They're going to do it. But I think social media is driving a hyperpolarization, which is going to result in serious unrest and strife. There was a story that I talked about earlier today. The NYPD has been training every day for Election Day unrest. So everybody's kind of expecting this to reach some kind of boiling point. So I guess, in that regard, I wonder what your thoughts are, Drew, on where we're going.
I go back and forth with a few buddies of mine. So most of my friends are pretty left-leaning. And I think one of the things that we always come back to is, how does the fever break, right? Like right now, I think we can all agree, whether it's chicken with head cut off or whatever metaphor you want to use, we're at a point where it's not tenable. And there doesn't seem to me to be a good, easy way to back down from the sort of abyss that we're staring into and have us come to a more peaceful understanding of our differences and the way we all work and what have you. So I do worry. I think where I net out to and where I always fall out to in these conversations is I'm worried that there probably will be violence before it gets better. It will continue to get worse before it gets better. And at some point, there's going to be nothing but violence. And I hope that I'm wrong, right? I sound a little bit, and I get that I sound a little bit like an extremist and a little off my rocker when I say that I think that's going to be the case, but I guess I just don't know how else we continue to move forward at the pace we're at the increasing it's like the music keeps getting faster and faster, and there's no one there to shut off the music. Yeah. So what happens when we're all running into each other headlong?
I think people are scared to admit that there's going to be violence.
Yeah,
people are scared to say it because of their optimism bias. I think people are scared to make predictions based on how they feel because they're scared of being wrong. I don't care. I'll tell you how I feel. I think Trump's going to win. I'm not entirely sure about the Senate or the House. I could be wrong. I don't know for sure. I just have a feeling based on the tightening of the polls and the voter registration gap. It looked really good for Trump and Republicans. We'll see how it plays out. I think there's going to be a massive wave of violence, particularly from the left. I believe that may coax out a right-wing response of some sort. Not entirely sure, but I talked to a lot of people and they're like, I don't think so. And I'm like, a guy walked up to some Trump supporter and put 2 bolts in his chest.
Right.
And then Antifa cheered for it. A security guard in Denver shot a Trump supporter in the face, and then they cheered for it.
Right.
Like, this stuff isn't slowing down, it's speeding up.
Exactly. And so and I think what I struggle with is I don't know a way where it slows down.
Exactly.
And so at some point, you got to assume that it bubbles over. And you're right. I think it's very, very difficult for Americans who, none of us have been alive for 150 years. We've never really seen anything like this. And so one of the models that I think is more helpful to look at rather than like a U.S. Civil War or what have you is something like the Troubles in Ireland, where you have 2 different sort of factions of people who it gets more and more tense and more frustrated, and at some point people start shooting.
Have you ever been to Belfast?
Yeah, I have.
You've seen the Peace Wall?
Yeah.
Did you look at the weird graffiti on each side of it? So this is really interesting for people who aren't familiar. So this is. Do you want to explain the Troubles a little bit?
Yeah. So in Ireland, there's a tenuous relationship between the Irish and the English for a long time, dating back to the first British occupation was in like 1099, something like that, way in the early aughts. And so eventually, after years and years of strife, the centuries of strife, it hit a boiling point when what is now Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, seceded from what was then England, what's now the UK, to become their own sovereign country. And then we were left with Northern Ireland, which had about a 50-50 split, I think, at the time of Catholics and Protestants. There was a lot of sectarian frustration and that kind of the spillover violence. And then eventually it all came to a head. And so people started shooting, and you would have...
bombings.
Exactly. There were bombings. There were shootings. There was the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, who was a faction of people in Ireland who thought that by causing violence, particularly in Northern Ireland and in London, that they could get the rest of Northern Ireland free. They could get the English out.
So the peace wall separated correct me if I'm wrong, two communities, right? It was like, I don't know the names of them, but basically I went to Belfast and I was there for that big bonfire night they do, where they set up those. Right. That's crazy. It's like 30 feet tall of just pallets and wood, and they torch the whole thing, and man, it lights up the sky like the sun. Anyway, the peace wall is interesting because on one side it's very imperial, militaristic, and on the other side it's very SJW, left wing.
Yeah.
Very stereotypically culture war. And I was asking this dude there about it. I'm like, on one side it's pro-Palestine, on the other side is pro-Israel. What does that have to do with Ireland? It doesn't matter. He told me if one side says it, the other side says the opposite.
Right.
And now what does that sound like today with Trump?
Yeah.
Trump says it, they say the opposite. That's just the way it rolls. So, yeah.
And it only goes one direction, right? And so what ended up happening? There's the Good Friday Peace Accords. After years of bloodshed, right, serious bloodshed, eventually they signed a peace treaty. But it's because the fire had kind of burned itself out. And my worry is we're at a point where we've got a lot of embers, and the embers keep kicking up, and they keep getting hotter, and they keep getting hotter. And there's no one sitting around to throw water on the situation that we have now. And so until those embers kick up into something like a fire, and then that fire burns itself out, I don't know how else we walk back.
We're a much bigger country than Ireland.
And with a lot more guns.
And that was Northern Ireland. We're talking about the entirety of the country. So my concern is that initially when we started seeing culture war conflict, street battles, a lot of people were like, oh, it's not going to get any, I had people telling me when I said this is going to get worse, they're like, no, because the government would never allow it. They're in government. What happens when you have someone in one branch of the government who's on one side of the debate and a person in the same department is on the other side, and they start butting heads with each other about who's evil, who's not? What happens when you start seeing, like we're seeing now in like the Pacific Northwest, these racially segregated trainings they're doing?
Yeah.
At a certain point, someone's going to be like, I refuse. I'll tell you what really scares me. When, the trans children issue, Joe Biden was asked a question about, I think, an 8-year-old trans child.
Yep.
I'm not here to make a judgment call or a moral call. Because I don't want to inflame tensions worse than they are. But I tell you this. You have a fight happening in Texas, and I don't know what the latest development is, where the mother says the child is trans and the dad says the child is not.
Right.
I am worried to think about what's going to happen when one parent feels their child is being physically harmed and they have no choice but to engage in some kind of physical maneuver of some type.
Right.
Whether you're left or right.
And how many, and I think that's a really good microcosm, but think about how many other situations in American life that could lead to something like that, right? Like part of my concern is there's so many little fires going all at once that I think individually could each be problematic, but when they all come together, right, when you have a bunch of different reasons why a bunch of different people are mad, and there's two sides to whatever the argument is, you've got two camps, you've got two teams, that it is combustible, right? And you have all these individual interpersonal circumstances that are combustible set against a backdrop that is already incredibly combustible. And yeah, so I mean, whether it's parents fighting over a custody battle like that with a child who may or may not be trans, who's, 8 years old, or a situation with a street rally in Portland, when you have that many sources of tension, eventually one of them is going to bubble up. And I worry that there's a little bit of a contagion going on for something like that, where as soon as people get angry and start shooting, more people get angry and start shooting.
Yeah, absolutely.
After 9/11, where everybody came out, I was in New York City that day, actually. Okay. I lived there, and everyone came out of their houses and was like sitting together on the street and talking, and there's a lot of humanity, and it was this tragedy that bound us. And I think that there's going to be a false flag tragedy coming up. I would imagine that they've been trying it. Russia's one.
Who's they? What do you mean?
That the U.S. government will impose some sort of some sort of collective tragedy on us so that we don't go to civil war.
Who's the government, though? Trump's fighting the government. The government's eating
I
itself.
don't know who runs the show exactly.
No, there's nobody.
There's the deep state. There's the
the intelligence agencies are fractured.
I think
screaming Russia.
maybe there will be many different people trying to show us many. Maybe it'll be aliens, but it won't really.
COVID didn't do it.
Just be vigilant about the next unifying tragedy because it'll probably let's look through it instead of at it.
Well, why? If what you're saying is true, it'd be a great thing for this country to heal the wounds.
We should do it. We don't need a fake tragedy to bind us.
COVID didn't do it, man.
Yeah,
no,
that's the
COVID
thing.
did everything worse.
I worry that we don't even have unifying tragedies anymore.
We don't.
Well, it could be like a weather tragedy. So I think we should decentralize our power grid first of all. And then if we have a tsunami, like we have 3 hurricanes in one season last year.
We have a bunch of hurricanes recently.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Yeah. So if we're getting flooding and then there's a volcano explodes and then there's a 10-year-long winter or
it's not going to do anything.
10-month-long winter. I mean,
I'll tell you what's going to happen.
People will support each other, and
they won't.
That could help.
In California, when the drought hit, the cities voted to take the water away from the poor migrants in 2 seconds.
Right.
In 2 seconds, it was gone, and their wells ran dry. And then nonprofits had to intervene and give them non-potable water.
It's a lot of it's because of the central electric grid for profit. If we
no,
all had electricity
this
to
is
share,
water. The
you
drought
can make
happened.
water with electricity.
Listen,
through condensation.
Now they're talking about they want to divert fresh water from the delta from the Bay Area south to help the farmers, which could potentially cause the water pressure to invert. So salt water would pour in to the Bay Area, turning all of the water brackish and just mutilating all the farms. People are fighting over water. They're not going to come together in a natural disaster. When people have a fundamental tribalist view, and the only thing that matters is my tribe versus your tribe, the earth could explode, and they would be like, "It's your fault."
Yeah, but I guess technology can help us in a time of crisis. Because if we all had electricity and we could all condense our water from the air, then if there was a flood or something, we could share water and not have fear of not having enough.
I'll tell you what, where we are now, it's like 10 gallons of water and condensation every morning on the deck. It's like you walk outside and you're splashing. I'm like, man, I'd like to get a funnel and just
dude. There's a lot of water out in the air that you can make.
But in California, there wasn't. And it was funny when I saw the canals full of fresh water, and I asked the farmer why they weren't just using that. He said the cities voted, we can't touch it.
That's how Los Angeles got made. They diverted water down from
that's what they're doing right now.
The river, Owens River Valley, I think it was. Mulholland.
Listen, LA's got a ton of people, and they say we get the water, you don't, and so it becomes an issue of power. Yeah. They didn't care about the poor migrants who were dying of thirst. They said, "Give me your water. Shut your mouth."
Yeah, getting enough water for people could be a good start.
A disaster won't bring us together. A disaster right now, in my opinion, would scare people and cause them to go nuts.
Right now, yeah, because we're not prepared for it.
No, they'll go in the other direction. They would say, "Gimme, gimme, gimme, F you. I need to survive."
Yeah. Like to me, I feel like it would be like if Hurricane Katrina happened everywhere in the country all at once, right? And so, unfortunately, Tim, I think you're right. I think that we're at a point now where you have 2 camps of people who really, really struggle not only to see their own fellows as patriots or compatriots, they struggle to see them as human, right? And so I think it's a lot easier. One, I think it makes things like someone from Antifa shooting a Trump supporter more likely to happen. 1, 2, even in the more mundane, the more milquetoast variety, I think it makes it easier to believe someone like Rudy Giuliani would do something like whatever it is, right? And so it just makes all of us a lot more willing to believe things that we wouldn't believe. 1, about someone we know. 2, about someone who we think shares our worldview, or 3, like at least someone who we can assume is going to be acting in good faith. And so where we are now is the reason you get these media cycles, whether it's Russian disinformation or whatever else, the reason they pick up so quickly is we're all pointing our mental guns at one another anyway. And I think when you're doing that, all you need is the tiniest little semblance of a match to be able to kick things off and kick them off badly. And it seems like every morning we wake up to do that anew. It's a new news cycle. It's a new something.
I swear to God, this is a video game or some sort of simulation, and we are controlling the morale. It's a morale thing, because if people are psycho, they're going to kill each other. But if they're not, if they love each other, they're going to help each other.
But this has been a part of human life and human existence.
Yeah, and it's amplified now with the internet video. We're
definitely.
Like,
yeah. The internet's making everything worse.
Or better. It just depends.
I don't know that we spend enough time talking about the second and third order consequences of social media and the internet and other things like that. Because you're right. I mean, I think one of my big contentions with the media is that the thing that they are doing that tends to be bad is they are responding to a certain set of incentives that their readers are not well served by. If a media needs to make money by serving ads, they need eyeballs. If they need eyeballs, they're not going to publish things that matter. They're going to publish things that collect eyeballs.
Right.
And as a result of that, you have all of these twisted incentive systems that I think they're too big and they're too scary and they're too colossal for any of us to try and talk about and wrestle with, because this is a system that we all live within, and the idea of trying to break out or punch out of that thing is scary and frightening. But I think if we invested a little bit more time and energy talking about those sorts of things, it would probably be beneficial.
I think you're right.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., so come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.